Hey folks, I'm JC from One Shot Adventures, and today, if you can't tell from my official Weyland-Yutani Burke vest, I'm returning to the Alien RPG with a full review of Destroyer of Worlds, a cinematic adventure that throws a brave squad of Colonial Marines into a near unwinnable situation surrounded by virtually all of the darkness and horrors of the Alien universe. Technically, Destroyer of Worlds is part 2 of the 3-part Draconis strain trilogy, a campaign that started with Chariot of the Gods and concludes with Heart of Darkness. But you can run this one, Destroyer of Worlds, mostly as a standalone. It only loosely connects to the other two. And if you've been following this channel, you'll know that I've played those adventures out of order with my group, so I can attest it works just fine on its own. And unlike Chariot of the Gods and Heart of Darkness, which were slow burn, isolated scenarios, Destroyer of Worlds is a balls-to-the-wall action-adventure movie. The players all play desperate Marines stranded on a frozen world, and they're going to use their pulse rifles, grenade launchers, and rockets to get themselves out of a very messy situation. If this sounds up your alley, well, grab your M41A sweethearts and lock and load, because not only am I going to give you a full review of Destroyer of Worlds, I'm going to give you Game Masters some tips and tricks on how to run this one like a pro. Uh-oh, I think they cut the power. Destroyer of Worlds is written by sci-fi novelist Andrew E.C. Gaska. He's led the charge on most of the other Alien adventures, as well as ones for the new Terminator RPG, so you can tell he knows his science fiction. Much like the other Free League Alien campaigns, Destroyer of Worlds comes in a beautiful box filled with wonderful components like maps, cards, and pre-generated characters. It's a lengthy 62-page adventure, but the playtime of this one is going to really vary. Game masters who want to emphasize role-playing and insert all of the various subplots can probably easily get 4-5 sessions out of this one. But you can also run it a lot faster if you trim out some of the excess. I've actually finished in 2 longer sessions with a smaller player group, but that group was also very laser focused on their mission the whole time and didn't stop and see the scenery much. Like I said up front, Destroyer of Worlds is part 2 of a 3-part, loosely connected series of Alien adventures, and I might even argue that it makes for a better finale versus Heart of Darkness, the official 3rd and final entry in this campaign series, but I'll save that thinking for another video. Ultimately, you don't have to have played or be familiar with the other adventures in this series to enjoy Destroyer of Worlds. The setup of the adventure is this. The PCs are a team of Colonial Marines stationed on the remote frozen moon of Ariarcus. This is an interesting world. It used to be a very productive oil refining moon, but over the decades it's fallen into disrepair. There's only a few hundred colonists left at the moon at this point, and they're for the most part anxious to leave. Years ago, the Colonial Marines took control of the planet as well as its space elevator. They called it Fort Nebraska. But when they heard the Union of Progressive Peoples, the UPP, kind of like the space commies of the Alien universe, were looking at Ariarcus as a strategic asset, well, eventually the Marines were ordered to leave to save their forces for a battle somewhere else in the universe, and so now what's left on this moon is mostly a skeleton crew of Marines. The whole planet has the feel of Saigon during the Vietnam War, with the Marines about to pull out, the population desperate and fearing an attack, and things are generally in a bad economic shape. So the PCs are some of these Marines stationed on this backwater moon, and they're assigned an unusual mission. It seems that 4 other Marines have gone AWOL, and they're rumored to be defecting to the insurgents on the planet who are working for the UPP. The Marines are ordered to find these AWOLs and bring them back before they can defect with classified information to the insurgents. Now, like the other Alien campaigns, each player is going to get a hidden agenda, with more unlocking as the story progresses. But The Agendas in Destroyer Worlds is much more straightforward versus the other Alien adventures. They're less tangled up with each other in the overall plot. These Marines are generally ones who want to do their duty, get the job done, and protect their teammates. You won't really find the all-out traitor in this adventure, although one character is kind of cool. He's the Marines' android medic. His name's Chaplin, and he's possessed kind of by another android on the planet who is trying to hide all the evidence of like secret xenomorph activity on the moon. So this android is gonna switch personalities back and forth over the course of the adventure. This is a really fun role for one player, but make sure you give it to an experienced role player in the group. But other than him, most of the others are very straightforward Marines like you'd expect out of a 1980s style movie. Now, as you might suspect, the Marines' mission is not going to be as straightforward as it sounds. You see, there's a secret lab hidden in Fort Nebraska, jointly operated by the Weyland-Yutani Corporation as well as a rogue Marine, Colonel Myers. While disassembling the lab in anticipation of evacuating the moon, 4 Marines were inadvertently attacked by facehuggers and impregnated. The colonel ordered these Marines treated with an experimental vaccine, a serum called the 26 Draconis strain, hoping that it would cure them. This was the drug that first appeared in Chariot of the Gods, the first adventure in this trilogy, but other than its appearance here, this is really the only connection between this adventure and that one. The problem with the 26 Draconis strain is it's sort of random. Sometimes it works and cures the host. Other times it doesn't. And sometimes it just transforms you into a completely different sort of alien monster. But soon after injected, these 4 Marines escaped the fort and ran into the city on Ariarcus. Afraid of what they carry could completely blow the lid off this secret lab, or worse, be useful in the hands of the enemies, the UPP, both Weyland-Yutani and Marine Command desperately wants those 4 AWOL Marines back. But the PCs know none of this, at first at least. They're just told these Marines are bad guys, might defect to the other side, and to go get them back stat. The first act of this adventure is the investigation, with the players tracking down those AWOL Marines who are now spread out in the small city on Ariarcus. One is dead, rotting in a jail cell, his chest burster already out of his body. Another has been taken into custody by the insurgents, and well, she's about to burst too. Another is in the hospital, also with a chest burster. And the 4th is sort of a GM wild card. You can insert this Marine, Colonel Wright, anywhere, and she's actually cured. The Draconis strain worked on her. And I really like that the adventure gives me as a GM an NPC to kind of use as I please, especially since I find that as this adventure goes on, the PCs are going to need an information source as the events of this adventure are just going to descend into complete chaos. It's really helpful having that NPC around. The PCs are given some very good leads from the very start of the adventure. And honestly, it's just all not that hard to find these missing Marines. The first stop that the PCs are told to go to, usually the local Oblivion bar, will give them clues as to the whereabouts pretty quickly, as well as they'll find camera footage of the Marines meeting with a local insurgent leader. So with any brains, your players will very quickly be able to find at least one of those infected Marines. And a scene or two later, they're going to be experiencing an alien attack as something horrible bursts out of them. And along the way, the PCs are also going to stumble across a private group of dog catchers, soldiers who are working directly for Weyland-Yutani and the mysterious Ms. Eckford, who's independently hunting the AWOL soldiers as well. So pretty quickly, the PCs are going to realize that these AWOLs are wanted for way more than stealing classified information. To make the adventure a little more flavorful, I really like to play up the hostility between the locals and the Marines. Like, I make it hard for the Marines to get information out of the average colonist here. No one likes the Marines. Everyone's bad-tempered and angry. Like, after all, the civilians feel completely abandoned by the Marines who've mostly pulled off the world at this point. And there's rumors of a UPP invasion. Those are everywhere. And so you really have to build the desperation of this planet in the first act, or else it's going to feel too much like a police procedural, but with Marines who generally aren't very good investigators. So I like to play up that hostility. It feels like it makes a little more sense that the Marines were sent to go bring in one of their own rather than hiring the marshals or some police group to go do it. As soon as the PCs witness the first appearance of an alien, Act 2 begins. But before I describe Act 2, I want to say that I like to trigger Act 2 when the PCs have specifically encountered Wojcik, the Marine that's being held in that insurgent compound. These are men who are loyal to the UPP, and this is a really fun scene where the PCs find out about this compound and are ordered to just take on a full-scale assault on it. It's remote, kind of in the middle of the nowhere in a snowstorm, and now they have to deal with machine gun turrets and rebels wielding guns, and then they have to deal with a body burster exploding out from the Marine Wojcik. It's a really fun, frantic action scene that requires good tactics on behalf of the players and makes the PCs feel like action heroes. And it's just such a strong way to end the first act. So I kind of keep the other aliens in this adventure in the shadows a little bit more. Like if the PCs find the Marine who's at the Marshall station where he's already exploded with a chest burster, they find him with a hole in his chest. Technically the adventure says there's a xenomorph in the ceiling there, but I don't make it obvious. I kind of keep that xenomorph hidden in the shadows, playing a little bit more like the monster from the first Alien movie. He's not gonna come out and attack brutally unless like the PCs go looking in the ceiling for him. And that just sets up the players a little bit more to have that first experience with an alien, that horrible body burster happening at the insurgent compound. So try to time it so Act 2 happens right after that. Act 2 begins with a full-scale UPP invasion of Ariarcus. Suddenly there are explosions everywhere, enemy troops are landing on the moon, and the city descends into war-torn chaos. There's not much that actually needs to happen in Act 2. It's actually described very lightly, so it's really up to the GM to make this an interesting part of the adventure. I like to crash a dropship not too far from the player's position and then order them to try to save the pilot, since the Marines up at the fort, at the top of the fort, at the top of the space elevator, they're desperate for pilots to evacuate the station. And so this gives the players a chance to again be Marine-like action heroes, think Black Hawk Down, and fight both angry armed civilians as well as some UPP soldiers both, and maybe pick up an ally or two along the way like that pilot. But then suddenly this act ends with a second attack. Suddenly black goo bombs like the ones seen in Alien Covenant bombard the planet again and transform most of the moon's populace into horrible abominations, or turning them into petrified grotesque statues. Yeah, hey, I'm an oil worker here, and let me tell you, Ariarcus sucks. Like, it's freezing all the time, and we have one bar, and like the oil's running out. Like, I'm an oil worker. What am I supposed to do? And the Marines all bailed on us, and now the UPP's invading us. Like, for what? What do they want? We got nothing. Like, what else worse can possibly happen? Okay. So the adventure never really says who does this second attack. I mean, it's obviously implied it's the engineers. Who else would have done this? And I have mixed feelings about this. I don't think you really need that attack to happen to up the desperation in the adventure. And the adventure doesn't really do anything with this attack. Like, it doesn't fundamentally change the plot. And it doesn't really do anything other than make a reference to Alien Covenant. Honestly, I would omit this second bombardment and just do a better job at making the angry civilians, the UPP soldiers, and the chaos of war the real threat that's happening here. In an adventure that already has xenomorphs, multiple types of xenomorphs, split personality androids, Weyland-Yutani dog catchers, insurgents, android soldiers, well, you really just don't need to add any more. It just feels like the adventure is trying too hard with this black goo attack. So I cut it, but you can do with it as you want. And so Act 3 begins when the players finally realize they just need to get off this moon. With the moon's spaceport blown up in the attack, the only real way off the moon is via the space elevator. The only way into the space elevator is through Fort Nebraska, which is miraculously still intact. The elevator, however, is stuck on the mysterious sub-level 3, which is where the secret bioweapons program once lived. And this is where those different player agendas really come into full force. Some of the players just want to get the hell off the planet. Others are going to want to blow up that weapons lab or even nuke the entire room, but those goals are largely compatible with each other.
All right, Marines, huddle up. Let me get this straight. Your agenda is to just blow up some secret lab. You just want to kill lots of bugs. And you over there, you think we should just nuke the whole moon, and I want to get off of it. Feels like we can get all that done.
Fort Nebraska is, of course, now completely infected by the xenomorphs. The PCs need to get into the base, navigate downward towards sublevel 3, reboot the reactor so they can restore power to the space elevator, and then take it all the way up to the orbital station where they can hopefully escape the system. This section of the adventure is basically a big dungeon crawl, although the adventure provides some events that the GM can use to try to make it more interesting. For example, in addition to things like rooms full of facehuggers, the players can find the frozen Colonel Myers. He was one of the guys who set up the weapons lab here, and he got facehugged, but now he's frozen himself in a cryotube, so the players can figure out what to do with him. My favorite one is where the players can find a group of surviving Marines, one of the few ones left in the entire base, but they are themselves all infected with chest bursters. And so at first the players think that these guys are on their side and they'll have them join up. And I always make one of them like a cute NPC Marine that the PCs just want to help and protect her for the rest of the adventure because she's scared and needs their assistant, only to kill her off in the last moments of the adventure. And they're always horrified when they see that trickle of blood come down her mouth. It's a great surprise for your players. Go ahead and use that. But the real threat in Fort Nebraska are the xenomorphs themselves, who become more prominent as the PCs descend into the base towards sublevel 3, where the weapons lab is. The fights here get really tough. One room alone has 6 xenomorph soldiers lurking in it. Others have swarms of facehuggers. Another one has a new xenomorph, a massive charger who is as big and tough as an alien queen. You have to be careful here because especially if you've made Act 2 a little bit bigger, I found that your players are going to be so full of stress in the Alien RPG that they could become completely like crazy and useless in this part of the adventure. So give them times to take breaks up to this point, or else the adventure is going to really turn into something that's unwinnable. Likewise, this base is so huge, there's 5 levels to it, that if the PCs go in the wrong direction or get lost, they're likely to get surrounded and killed. And this is doubly true because there's a random table for whether or not an elevator is broken, on fire, or inhabited by an angry xenomorph. Bad luck can really end this adventure prematurely here. So I like to give the players times to take breaks. This is also a reason not to make too big of a deal out of Act 2, just so your players aren't so full of stress that they can't get anything done in this final act. I also, at the beginning of the adventure, before I run this section, I roll for each elevator what's in each one before the players get there, so me as a GM can have a better idea of which way they need to go to get through there, and I can give the players some help, just saying that their motion trackers are detecting certain things or giving them a reason to use the computers in the base. You just have to help them through here, otherwise, like I said, bad luck could just completely wipe out the party. Eventually, the PCs will fight their way to the space elevator and discover that it's inhabited by a surprise alien queen. It was being loaded on the space elevator during the attack, killed her handlers, and it's now nesting on the elevator. So the PCs now need to deal with her as they ascend up to the orbital station. Oh, and then halfway up the tether, the PCs see that it's been severed during the orbital bombardment. So now they have to escape to a nearby FTL-capable emergency escape vehicle to actually escape Ariarcus in one piece. And that's Destroyer of Worlds. As you can tell, Destroyer of Worlds is a kitchen sink adventure, with the author throwing everything you can possibly imagine in a military-themed alien story into one adventure. So what do I think? I think Destroyer of Worlds does many things well, but few things great. I actually like that the adventure begins with an investigation, seemingly giving the players an entire city to explore. This is very different than the other alien adventures, but in reality, that investigation is very straightforward. And while the city seems sprawling, the only locations that are described are the ones where the AWOL Marines are at. the players don't really have to use their brains to find the AWOL Marines, they just have to follow the breadcrumbs that are provided. If you compare this investigation to, say, a Call of Cthulhu one, where solving the problem requires role-playing, clue finding, and some good skill rolls, Destroyer of Worlds AWOL Hunt is much lower complexity. And then the middle act happens, and while it's an excuse to have some fun firefights with UPP or insurgent forces, there's no set piece here that the players will really remember, forcing the GM to make this section of the adventure memorable themselves. Wars and big battles are notoriously difficult to handle in RPGs. The best ones I find insert the PCs at like a pivotal moment of the battle, or let them operate on the fringes on like an important special forces side mission, but Destroyer of Worlds doesn't give that kind of mission or agency to the players during this big attack. So again, it's kind of up to the GM to make that section work. And then the final act, fighting through the fort to get to the space elevator, is also straightforward. It plays out like a lot of Dungeons and Dragons adventures play out. The Marines are going to fight room to room, fighting bad guys, and then take out the big boss, or two of them in this case, the Alien Queen and the Charger, in the space elevator. And while I love the Alien RPG for its stress system and ability to handle short, intense combats, I find that it doesn't handle lots of combats very well. It's just not tactical at all, and fights can get long and repetitive. I actually ran this adventure twice, once with the Alien system and then again with GURPS. And I actually found that the more realistic GURPS combat and gun system works so much better in this final act. GURPS is a game where squad tactics matter and the PCs have to think about things like suppression fire, like aiming and ducking behind cover, and my players had a blast with the combat in that system, but less so when I ran it with a different group using the official Alien system. So ultimately, I think Destroyer of Worlds is too big and yet too empty. The city is huge, but only features a few well-described locations. There's a massive war happening around the PCs, but it's only really sketched over. There's a ton of factions to play, the Marines, the Insurgents, the UPP, the Angry Civilians, Weyland-Yutani, but each one only plays a small part in the adventure. And the fort at the end, it doesn't really need 5 levels like you could have done with just 2 really great ones. It's just too sprawling for its own good. And as a result, this whole adventure can be really difficult for a GM to prepare without really making a lot of notes and outlining how they expect it to happen. But while that sounds like a lot of critique of Destroyer of Worlds, there's nothing just outright bad in this adventure either. If your players want to go on a bug hunt, fight some cool opponents, blow things up, and play it like a 1980s action movie where the plot doesn't entirely make sense, but that's okay because there's explosions that are big, well, this adventure actually works really well. And the ending does feel like the Aliens movie, with tight corridors, dangerous ambushes, and a med lab filled with dark secrets. So it actually nails that feel that it was going for. So ultimately, I think whether this adventure is for you depends on your players. If your players want that straightforward Aliens action adventure, Destroyer of Worlds will give them what they want. But players who are craving more horror, a tightly crafted plot, and twists and turns and surprises that they need to role-play their way through, they just won't find that in Destroyer of Worlds unless the GM does a lot of work to pull the right combination of characters and subplots and events together and then adds their own touches. But for you GMs who are going to run this adventure, I assembled my top 6 tips on how to make this adventure run especially great. Number 1, make sure that Chaplain and Dante are picked as player characters. These 2 characters, Chaplain and Dante, do a great job driving the plot forward. Chaplain is that split personality android who's not only fun to play, but gives the PCs more information about the base, the secret lab, and the motivations of the bad guys, which I find is otherwise a little obtuse in this adventure. While the Marine Dante, while she does have a chest burster inside her, well, she'll figure that out and be highly motivated to get back to the base and the secret lab to get it removed. So make sure these 2 characters get picked first. I also like to insert Silva if I can because they're one of the leaders of the group, and I kind of find that for a Marine adventure you need somebody of like higher military rank to just help take orders and give them out. But make sure all these characters are handed to the right players. Chaplain needs to be a good role player who won't mind conflicting goals and can handle that with ease. And Dante, well, that player needs to be one who won't mind when their character dies horribly 2/3 the way through the adventure, which is likely to happen. Number 2, improve the mission briefing. For some reason, the book says to hand the players the NPC cards of the AWOL Marines. But these cards have some serious spoilers on them. For example, one of them just outright says that the Marine has a chest burster in them. Just ignore this. Don't hand out those cards. Please don't do it. Keep your players in the dark. I made my own handout, which just shows the portraits of the Marines and some basic info on them that will help the players pick the order in which they'll go after them. That's good enough. Don't share anything more. Just have Hatfield, the guy who gives them the order, say, hey, this is all classified. Just shut up and do your jobs. Get those Marines back. Plenty good. Also, as written, there's not a lot of urgency given to the player's mission. And I find that that's a problem motivating the players. And also, when I was reading about this adventure on the internet, there's a lot of chatter about just how stupid it is that the Colonial Marines never saw a massive system-wide UPP invasion about to hit. I solved both of these issues by informing the players during the first briefing that the UPP fleet has entered the system, but it's agreed to let the rest of the Colonial Marines evacuate the planet peacefully over the next 72 hours. So Major Hatfield, the PC's commander, tells them that he needs their mission wrapped up in 48 hours, giving them 24 hours to evacuate before the UPP takes over the moon. But of course something happens and those UPP commies bail out on their agreement and start the bombardment early. But if you take this approach, this adds tension to the investigation. There's that looming threat, and it makes the Marines, well, feel less stupid that they didn't spot an entire invasion force halfway through the adventure. Number 3, introduce Ms. Eggford as early as you can. Destroyer of Worlds doesn't have a lot of recurring NPCs, and sometimes I find that's a problem because GMs need NPCs to leak information to players or kind of send them in different directions. But Ms. Eggford is a great one to use. She's the woman, she works for Weyland-Yutani, and she's one of the people behind the secret lab on Ariarcus. But she really has some interesting mixed motivations. At the beginning, she's out to find the AWOL Marines too. So I have her show up right away and offer her help legitimately. She shows up with her soldiers and she says, I'm here to help, let's split up, let's sync our locators with each other and kind of get the PCs to trust her. And then when Act 2 starts, I keep going in that same direction. Now Eggford needs their help during that UPP invasion. Maybe she's holed up somewhere and she's calling them for help and she's over her head. And then, of course, the players, as they start to head over to Fort Nebraska, she can share some information, share a little bit about how there's something valuable in sublevel 3 with the space elevator. And then, of course, in the end, she'll completely screw the players because she just wants to get her hands on the Draconis 26 strain that's still left there. And, of course, she'll betray them. But if you make Ms. Eggford a recurring character, it just gives the role players in the party something to do. It adds a little bit of puzzle solving, whether or not the players trust her or not. And I find generally improves the adventure when you have that character coming and going pretty regularly. So go ahead and use her. Tip number 4, strand your players. Destroyer of Worlds has a timing problem with Fort Nebraska. Once the invasion starts, the PCs are generally no more than an hour or so from the fort. And when they arrive, well, it's already been mostly cocooned by aliens. Their xenomorphs are everywhere, Marines have all been face-hugged and killed, and that's a lot to have happened in just an hour. It just breaks your suspension of disbelief. So to help this, like I mentioned before, I don't trigger the UPP invasion until the PCs assault the insurgent compound, which I set pretty far out, 20, 30 miles outside the city. I had a blizzard in that sector, one that blocks the satellite view and a lot of the imaging systems that the Marines may rely on. And then, after that encounter there, as the invasion starts, I cruelly shoot down the player's transport vehicle, stranding them in the middle of the frozen wilderness. So now the players have to trudge back to the city in these fierce blizzard conditions. It could take days. And That's also when I communicate to the players when they're like halfway back. They get a radio message from command that a dropship sent to retrieve them was also shot down, and now they have to go off course to go rescue that pilot I talked about, which takes them another few hours out of their way, but can give them a cool action sequence, allowing them to race to the dropship before the UPP gets there. And of course, the dropship is far too damaged to fly and to fix, and so now the PCs have to spend more time getting back to the city. But this time away from the city gives Fort Nebraska time to be overwhelmed. The city can descend even more into utter chaos, making it feel very dangerous to enter. And if you do decide to use the engineer's black goo attack, well, this lets the PCs easily be far enough away from the city center that they don't instantly mutate or die when that bomb hits. Okay, this is going to be a fast one. Fort Nebraska has a completely intact, well-stocked armory, and the book says it's fully equipped with everything that the Marines need. Get rid of this armory, like severely nerf everything that's in there. Maybe you give the players an extra pulse rifle or a few grenades, but limiting the players' equipment as they head into the alien-infested base will just up the tension and make the players rely more on stealth and cleverness and ambushes versus just going room to room emptying their magazines. Like I said before, there's too much stuff in Destroyer of Worlds. It's a kitchen sink adventure, and if you use everything, I promise you it will feel that way. Less is more. I already talked about how I remove the engineer's attack on the planet. I simplify Act 2 to just one great set piece, rescuing that pilot from the downed dropship surrounded by UPP troops. I only use about a third of each act's events. The last time I played this adventure, I even removed the alien queen and instead used the alien charger as the final boss in the space elevator. This worked great because now you don't get 2 boss battles in a row, and honestly, I find fighting an alien queen at the end of this adventure is just a little too on the nose. Take this adventure and just don't be afraid to trim away all of the fat until you find something that will work great for your players. Oh, and a bonus tip. If you're going to play this adventure over virtual tabletop, go check out KatakiY's amazing maps that he created for Destroyer of Worlds. They look fantastic and they're accurate, and you should totally use them. See the link in the description below. And while you're at it, check out my blog, oneshotadventures.com, where you can download some of the assets I created for this adventure, like bonus tokens for all the minor NPCs, new handouts, and even GURPS characters for this adventure for those of you who prefer that system. Whew. Well, those are all my tips, thoughts, and advice for Destroyer of Worlds. I know it was a lot. And like I said, there is good stuff in this adventure, and it is worth running if you love military action, but at the end of the day, it is kind of just another bug hunt. Well, hopefully you found this video helpful, and if you'd like to see more video reviews like this one, well, go ahead and like and subscribe to this channel. Oh, and if you've run or played Destroyer of Worlds, well, I would love to know what your experience was like. Did you have any survivors? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, I'm JC, and just remember, if your GM hands you a card that tells you that you're having some heartburn, you better just prepare for the worst.